Yo guys, what is going on? Got a special video for you guys today. So I'm going to be talking about today how exactly are you supposed to beat the Crossheart deck out of set 10. For those of you who don't know, the Crossheart archetype is undisputably the strongest deck. It's been terrorizing Japan for quite a while, and a lot of people are dreading against playing against it, but fear not, I got you guys covered. Haven't really done a lot of card discussions like this, but anyways, I thought I'd do something fun for once. Let's go ahead and get into it. So for first off, I want to mention the Floodgate Digimon. I think this is by far one of the most effective methods to counteract the Crossheart deck. And by Floodgate Digimon, I'm specifically talking about Psychmon, Solarmon, as well as Chikurimon. The latter two are new out of the Jesmon and Ragnarlord Mon starter deck, but we've seen Psychmon around a little bit against, it's really strong against D-Reapers and some other decks. So for starters, this mechanic, this Floodgate effect does shut down the Digi-Cross play, so your opponent cannot actually reduce the play cost via Digi-Cross because it is still reducing the play cost. Therefore, if as long as you have any of these Digimon on the field, they need to Digi-Cross for the full 9 cost of Cross 4 or 10 cost of Cross 5. You get my drift. Basically, they're unable to play their main boss monsters. Now, there are definitely downsides to this, but I want to talk about the upsides first. Firstly, they are easily incorporated into a lot of decks. You don't really have to go out of your way too much to incorporate these cards if you're playing a purple, red, or black deck, because it's just a level 3 you can play. If you got multiples, you can Digivolve one just to cycle some draws, and you can definitely hard play them as well. With a deck like Minervamon, you can even recur your Psychmon multiple times. So they don't require too much kind of thinking to incorporate into your existing strategy. They're also good against other matchups. I do want to mention that these Floodgates do stop DeathXmon. They are really good against things like Bellstar as well. So it's not only that you're preparing for Crossheart, but in doing so you are also covering some other more niche scenarios, but those are definitely welcome as well. You're mainly trying to beat the deck you're probably going to be playing against the most, whether it be in a local tournament or a bigger event. So Floodgate's really, really powerful Digimon. Now the downside, of course, being that not every deck can incorporate these. If you're playing like a green deck or a yellow deck or something, you kind of have to either come up with some other strategy, or if you want to play these cards specifically, you're going to have to hard play them. So that's kind of the unfortunate thing. Also, the Crossheart deck does play things like Crimson Blaze, Fireball to be able to delete their opponent's Floodgates. So they're definitely going to be expecting you to play cards like this. One other method I do want to mention is going to be the De-digivolve mechanic. So not necessarily just DeathXmon, although that I think that is the most effective means, but there are other cards such as Metal Impulse, such as the Chikurimon as well. De-digivolve as a mechanic is really strong against Crossheart because it does not trigger the material save ability, because material save says basically like when the Digimon would be deleted, but if you de-digivolve something like a Cross 4 or maybe Cross 5 or something, that Digimon gets trashed from the top, and then you're left with a stack of level 3s. DeathXmon specifically is really, really powerful because it punishes the Crossheart deck for going wide. A lot of times they will have 4, 5, 6 Tamers on the field because that's just the way the deck is functioning. You really rely on your Tamers as well as the material to keep the materials under them and to get all your passive effects, your searches and whatnot. So it's a little bit more difficult to play around DeathX. So DeathX being a card lets you punish them for going wide, whether it be with Tamers, whether it be with their level 4s or lowers, and then of course de-digivolving their Cross 4, Cross 5, it'll then proceed to kill everything else in the stack. Of course getting around the material save effect, and at worst, like let's say that it got a Cross 4, you de-digivolve it, there's like a Ballistamon or a Shoutmon or something, you'll get like 1 save underneath there versus material saving like 2 to 3 Digimon. So a really, really powerful counter. Another thing is that it is very difficult for Crossheart to be able to out a DeathXmon that is already present on the board, especially if you've got multiples of them. Their only real card that people are commonly playing is going to be Sunrise Buster, and Sunrise Buster requires you to basically have 5 or more Tamers in order to neg DeathXmon down to 0. So that's really their only out to it. Other than that, it's really difficult for them to get rid of a 15,000 Digimon that will nuke their board every single time it resolves its effect. The next kind of mechanic I want to talk about is going to be Tamer removal. Okay, so these are definitely more niche cards. I've got Black War Greymon, Lucemon Chaos Mode, as well as the new Dark Knight X Antibody. So these can only really be played in certain decks. So this kind of really limits yourself to be playing one of these decks. But if, for example, if you're expecting a big cross heart turnout and your locals or something, maybe you can pick up Black War Greymon or play Dark Knightmon. So the reason why these cards are so powerful is because, like I said, Crossheart is so very reliant on their Tamers. Getting rid of their Tamers prevents them from getting value off of the Digimon that they had spent their time material saving. So for example, getting rid of their Taiki, first of all, limits their mechanics from being able to use their Digimon underneath their Tamers. That's what Crossheart is all about. So if you remove Taiki from the equation and maybe pop another Tamer while you're at it with like something like Black War Greymon, you're limiting their resources because, okay, they can save their Digimon, but if they can't access all the Digimon that's underneath their Tamers, they're really going to have to just hard play everything in hand. And then if you combine this with like a Chikurimon or a Solarmon or a Psychmon, which these decks can play, it's going to be really, really powerful. Lucemon Chaos Mode, a little bit more niche, but that can definitely come up in the Minerva loop deck. Cheating that out for free with Minervamon is really, really powerful. And then, like I said, limits their resources, prevents them from using them for Digicross, and then simultaneously gets rid of those Digimon. So if you pop a Tamer that's got like 2 to 3 materials underneath it, if they're not playing around your Tamer removal, those Digimon that they saved earlier will just go straight to the trash. So they won't be able to get value off of that either. So that's a really, really powerful tool at your disposal if you're playing one of these decks that can play Tamer removal, is going to be getting rid of their material saved Digimon. And then the next one I want to talk about is going to be big blockers, as I like to call it. So this is, again, limited to more specific decks. There's not really too many cards outside of like DeathXmon that can be played in just like anything. But 2 more examples here would be Gaiomon and Magnamon. Gaiomon, I would say, because typically you got like the black Greymon underneath them to give him blocker. But the thing with the big blockers, right, is first of all, like Magna X, right? Magna X plus Golden Knight is really, really difficult for them to out. Magnamon X is a not once per turn, like redirect attack. So any of their Digimon that they're swinging with early game will just go straight into Magnamon X, saving you a lot of security early on. Even when they go for their cross 4, cross 5 plays, they won't be able to out this card unless they've got, like I said, Sunrise Buster. However, if you've evolved your Magnamon X with the Golden Knight option card, its DP won't be able to be reduced, so that really just limits their out down to basically like a Death X or like something like that. But you know, if you've got like Armor Purge underneath the Magna X, then even that won't be able to do anything. So Magna X is a really, really powerful card against the Crossheart deck. Similarly, Gaiomon also prevents early swings if you establish a big blocker early enough. Being able to like block with a Black or Greymon, unsuspend, block again, or just have like a 12 to 13,000 body that your opponent can't out. Except with like 1 or 2 cards. It's going to prevent you from taking damage pretty early on. They're really going to have to wait and accumulate the resources in the back before they attack. But of course, if you're playing something like Gaiomon, you've got tools that can answer their Tamers as well. So blockers, really, really solid against the deck, I think. Speaking of, I do want to mention that Cross 5 is also a blocker. So cards such as Fire Rocket that the Armor deck plays, that pop blockers, are also pretty cool techs as well to be able to get rid of their Digimon just straight up. Okay, now I just want to get into like the honorable mentions, but like the more niche cards, but still stuff that's like worth mentioning, stuff that I kind of like messed around with throughout testing, and that could definitely come in handy. So Memory Disruption, I want to mention things that can slow the game down to where your opponent isn't able to do too much per turn. Stuff like BT4 Kari that basically gives you memory every time your opponent will swing at you, and when you lose a security card. card. So if you've got multiple Karis on the field, you can definitely limit what your opponent is doing every single turn. So if you're playing a deck like Security Control, 4 Karis is probably the way to go, even though I think you have a rough matchup to begin with just because the Crossheart deck is so aggressive. Being able to establish Karis early and then combine that with stuff like Flame Hellscythe, Magna Angemon to recover afterwards, I think it could be really, really valuable. De-digivolve is another card I thought of that was seen in a lot of kind of BT7 like as like a rogue choice. I saw it in a lot of BT7 side decks when side decks were being tested out and being played in Purple Hybrid and stuff. If you're able to play something like De-digivolve, again, maybe in a Minerva loop, or maybe if you're playing Bagra Army or something like that, it has the opponent's turn 1 effect where when your opponent plays a Tamer, gain 3 memory, not once per turn, of course. So that, again, just really slows down and limits what your opponent can do. If you put them to 3 memory and they play a single Taiki, it's already passing turn back over to you at 3. They got 1 search, and then you're able to, if you're able to answer that maybe with something like a Dark Nymon X if you're playing a purple-black build, or maybe a Lucilon Chaos mode or something, you're in a really good position. So De-digivolve I definitely wanted to mention as another really cool card. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about hand control. I think this is something that we don't really have too much experience with in the Digimon TCG. But I think the fact that Crossheart draws 10 billion cards per turn is a really, really crazy kind of aspect of the deck. And so there are a couple cards that can kind of limit that, albeit, again, these aren't the most like meta relevant. And if you were going to include any sort of any one of the techs I like talked about, I'd rather you like include like the earlier discussions of like the floodgates and Tamer removal. But if you guys want to know some like hand control-y cards, Mad Leomon is one that was introduced in BT10 where it's got the opponent's turn effect. If the number of cards in your opponent's hand increases by an effect, you can trash a Digivolution card, and then they trash the number of cards they just added. So if they're like Fireball, draw 2, you can detach 1, and then they have to discard 2. So it's really good against this, against Cross 4, because Cross 4 also on plays draws 2. So again, it's just about limiting the resources and making sure they won't be able to just straight up OTK you. Mad Leomon's again really good because you can have it in multiples, and it's only a level 4 Digimon. Another card that could possibly be teched into Minerva Loop is basically the only deck that could play this card. But I honestly don't know like how relevant this is. I just thought it was like a cool effect. It has the one Digivolving effect. All players trash their cards until they have 5 cards left. So if your opponent's like turn 2 to 3, if they've got like 10, 12 cards in hand, they're trashing a really, really big amount of their hand. So combine that with something that is preventing them from playing their cross 4s and cross 5s like a Psychmon, limiting their hand resources, and then being able to, if you have the opportunity to get rid of their Taikis or something, being able to limit the resources they have on field as well, like they can't access their Digicross materials. That is a really, really good lockdown, I think. So this card has a lot of potential, I think, to be able to like be a really good counter pick to the Crossheart deck. But anyways, guys, so just kind of to wrap up, I think Floodgates and DeathXmon are the easiest to incorporate into most decks. Those are probably your best bets when it comes to playing against Crossheart. If you're playing something like Jessmon, throw in some Solarmons. If you're playing Minerva Loop, put in some Psychmons. If you're playing something like Black or Greymon, you can probably play either of those, Solarmon or Chikurimon. Tamer removal is super effective. So again, if you're playing a deck that has access to Tamer removal, like Black or Greymon, like Dark Knightmon, definitely consider playing those if maybe your meta is swamped with the Crossheart deck, and consider counterpicking. So consider, like I said, something like Magnamon X, something like Gaiomon, some decks that have a really, really strong matchup against the Crossheart deck, and they can play a lot of these cards to counter the deck. And my last point here is, if you really can't beat them and you want another way to be able to consistently beat the deck, might as well try to pick up the deck yourself. The deck is so powerful that you definitely have a good chance, if you know the mirror match, you definitely have a good chance of beating out a lot of Crossheart players. So that's definitely on the table. I don't want to leave that out as something that is just not possible at all. Playing Crossheart and taking it out to beat Crossheart is definitely a viable option. Lots of Crossheart lists are playing things things like DeathXmon and Crimson Blaze and stuff like that to be able to counter against the mirror match. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed this sort of discussion, in-depth discussion, let me know down in the comment section below what sort of discussions would you guys like to see next. And let me know if I missed anything when it comes to beating Crossheart. I made this as a somewhat comprehensive guide, but definitely not everything. So let me know down in the comments if I missed anything. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.